Hi, I'm Rob Vanstone, and welcome to the 73rd edition of the Leader Post Rider Rumblings podcast. If I sound a little hoarse, I'm trying to fight off a chest cold. So Murray will do a soliloquy for the next 40 minutes. Murray McCormick, our esteemed football writer.
Nay, you don't have a horse cold.
Oh, goodness. Is it started already? We're in a new room.
Try to rein in my humor.
Sorry.
Right.
The naysayers are out there already.
The new room is the main event.
We've got a new room. It's suitably gray, like its occupants right now, the exception being the young producer, Mark Melnichuk. It's our 73rd edition of the Rider Rumblings podcast, and each week we pick a corresponding rider uniform number or numbers from today or yesteryear. And so number 73, Gordon Sturtridge, who was killed in the Mount Slessy air disaster in December of 1956. Number 73, Gordon Sturtridge. So we honor him today, as have the Rough Riders, by retiring his number, as they did for number 40, Mel Beckett, number 55, Mario DeMarco, and number 56, Ray Cernick, who also died in the car in the plane crash.
So that little tidbit means I don't have to look it up on the team. There's no 73s on the team.
So there has not been a 73 since 1956 because they retired.
I can
the
tell you
numbers of
that
the
63 years off the top of my bald head.
So, one pretty monstrous story in Riderville. I don't think it's a huge surprise because I think both sides wanted to get this done from the beginning, and that was made pretty clear. Cody Fajardo with a new contract, an extension carrying through the 2021 CFL season.
Why on election day, though? Can we just, I don't know, you got to announce it sometimes, but here's an excuse me.
We're both hoping to live through for the duration of this podcast.
Regardless, they did it on election day, maybe, because you and I were discussing maybe they'd hide something, maybe some bad news. Instead, this is a good news announcement that I guess it doesn't matter, got the same reaction for everyone else, and we're all in favor. I think it addresses so many concerns. First off, it makes life a little easier for Cody. Doesn't have to answer the free agent questions for the remainder of the season. Secondly, it gives the Riders stability at a quarterback position for a couple of years and probably longer than that. And thirdly, they've got a great quarterback locked up for a while. And I know that's all tied into it, but I don't think he was going to go anywhere else. I really think that no other team was going to be able to offer what the Riders, and you've written about it many times, there's no other team in the league could offer what the Riders offer Cody. And if he's making in the $440 to $450 range, I think that's what he deserves. I don't think he's a $700,000 a year quarterback. He's not a $500,000. The going rate is about $400,000 for good quarterbacks.
I think if he'd wanted to push it to $500 via free agency, he could have gotten that.
But where would he have ended up? Ottawa, Toronto?
You're starting over again.
Yeah.
And he made it very clear from the outset that he didn't want that. I think, if anything, the Rough Riders got a bargain here. If you look at what the premier quarterbacks are making in the Canadian Football League, and you look at the way he's playing, he is a premier quarterback, and I think he has to be in the conversation for most outstanding player. Yeah. I think he's in that top 5. So when you're talking about a player in that echelon, and when you consider the remuneration that the elite quarterbacks are making or receiving, I think he's underpaid. I think the Rough Riders got a great deal here. I mean, obviously, Cody Fajardo, there won't be any tag days for him making that kind of money.
No.
Even what he's making now is a lot more than the average person makes.
I'm surprised it was a little bump in his salary for this year, though. You know, it doesn't seem to.
How do you work that into the cap?
Yeah, I know.
That becomes a problem.
But they don't have Zach Collaros' salary hanging around them.
No, but they paid him $170 up front. Yeah, so that was still on the books, and they still made Micah Johnson the highest paid defensive player in the league.
But don't you just
paying Brendan Labatt over $200,000. Yeah. So they got some money that, although that money was cap shielded for a lot of the year.
Yeah, so I kind of thought he might get a little bump this year, just to kind of bring him up to maybe the idea of a premier quarterback, but that's fine. It's his contract. He's happy with what he's got.
It's tough to do at this time of year when you've made your plans for 2019 and you're trying to stay within a cap and try to win a Grey Cup this year, and all of a sudden you're adding 5, probably not 6, but 5 figures to the cap tab for 2019.
And he's all about, and Craig has mentioned, Dickinson's mentioned, just team above self, and he's not putting himself above the team. And he mentioned it a number of times yesterday that he appreciates his teammates. It's not just him that's earned this new contract and the money, even though it's him that earned this new contract and the new money. But I like that fact that he kept mentioning his teammates and kept mentioning the franchise and mentioning the community. He really said everything right, but not. Sometimes we've heard the right and it hasn't been genuine. And this was the right stuff, and it's a genuine from the heart.
Yeah, everything Cody Fajardo has said has been genuine. Sometimes you hear the right stuff from other people, and you can tell that it's as disingenuous as can be. But he just is absolutely a genuine person.
Even we've talked about the religious stuff too, and you and I both. Neither you and I are very religious, and we tend to stay away from that just because it seems to be some part. But he uses it's very part of him. His faith is very important to him, and that's cool too. And it's everything about him. It's a great signing, and I think the Riders are going to be settled for a couple of years, and now he's just got to maybe slide a little more.
And there's I've heard a few people say that there's a risk here, and that he's only played or started 15 games in the Canadian Football League. It's a lot less of a risk to pay Cody Fajardo somewhere in the 400s than it was to pay Zach Collaros that money. Yeah. If you're willing to pay Zach Collaros $430,000, which he made last year, I think for throwing 9 touchdown passes and 13 interceptions, if Cody Fajardo and his agent wanted to go to the wall on this, they could have said, okay, this is what you paid that guy who hadn't had a good year since 2015. Yep. And look what you got. So why can't we get 500? Why can't we get 550? If they really wanted to push this and play hardball and extract every cent out of this franchise, they could have.
Yeah,
and so credit to them for putting
and rightfully so.
Team above self.
That the money is about the money. It's professional sports. It's not amateur sports. But Cody still has this sort of attitude that it's like an amateur sport thing. It's the team first and all for one and that stuff. And we'll find out when we talk to the players a little later that how they think about this, what it means for this team. And Jeremy O'Day made another good statement yesterday, and that's what I felt since this season started. It's not about the 2020 Grey Cup. It's 19. It's 19 right now. It's about doing everything they can to win now and build, of course, building towards 2020. But it's still about this season. And I think we have to give Jeremy O'Day incredible credit for what he's accomplished this year. Of all the free agents he signed, the only, I don't know if it's fair to call Zach a dud, the only bust was Zach Collaros, if you look at all the guys he's brought into this team.
I mean, they got 3 plays out of him. Yeah. And they knew he was fragile.
And then, so there was one, they took a gamble and lost, but you think William Powell.
They covered themselves by signing Cody Fajardo.
Yes. So they did that. So William Powell, going to be a 1,000-yard rusher twice.
It already has been.
That's a strange play. It's funny because you mentioned this. They didn't announce anything in the press box, anything that he was 1,000 yards or anything like that. He was just rolling up.
Is there anybody in the press box other than you in
Vancouver? There were 3 working media that I could count.
Really?
3. And that's what CP, Ed Willis, myself.
How many empty seats is that? I've never been in the press box.
It's absolutely. I remember, and I mentioned this a couple of times, being in that press box, and it was full. Like, not full, but jammed with lots of people. And I'm looking around, and I have 3 people. And even at the media availability, there was CP, myself, and CFL.ca for the media availability. Like, if BC isn't winning, they don't exist.
If BC is winning, it's a bit of a push sometimes.
It's just so sad to say because I was going to mention this. They put on an amazing game product. They had a DJ. The music is loud and bumping and modern and not. The Riders lean a little bit too heavy on country, even for a guy who likes country on my taste. I know, and I like blues, Rob. Blues and rock and roll, but
and blues there's so much jazz in blues, so we can talk about that later.
But the Lions put on a great game day show. Lots of music, lots of dancing, lots of noise, pumped in noise maybe, but. So I'm looking around and the people are having a blast. The people that were there, the 18,000, were having fun. So that's kind of like what I've said about Toronto. Toronto's another city that puts on a great game day product, and no one goes to watch it. And I wonder how much it's got to be frustrating for the people who work like that. But I don't know. It's not. Who knows when that's going to be sorted? I don't think it's for bigger heads than you and mine will ever figure out how to get people to go to games in Toronto and BC.
But it's. Anyway, Riders are going to need some help from BC if they.
And do you really think they're going to?
I mean, that's a tall order.
Like 6 sacks and 4 fumbles.
The Riders may need some help from BC.
May need some help. I think
Calgary plays BC in the final week.
I think Calgary's going to win on Friday night. I just don't think Winnipeg's got the gumption or whatever it is to take to beat Calgary. And I'm not sure the Riders do yet. I still think
Riders haven't proven that.
No one's proven.
Of all the things that the Riders have done this season, the one thing that they have not done, the one thing they have not accomplished, is proven they can get over that Calgary hurdle. That's the one unchecked box on their regular season, and nothing is going to. Even if they finish ahead of Calgary in the standings, there'll still be that lingering, looming question: can they beat the Calgary Stampeders? They lost 37-10 at home. They lost 30-28 at McMahon Stadium, and they did all sorts of things to try and donate the game to the Stampeders and only lost by 2. Yeah. So you can interpret that any way you want. maybe that's a positive sign that a flawed performance still was nearly sufficient when it came to beating the Calgary Stampeders, but that's gonna dog them until they can prove they can do it. If they get Calgary at home in the playoffs, it's a bit of a different scenario. But I'm not sure, Murr, that going to Calgary is a bad thing. Historically, it hasn't proven to be. This Calgary team tends to get pretty high on itself pretty quickly. That's been their, as successful as the Stampeders franchise has been since John Hufnagel has been there, there's been the tendency to blow it. And to especially at home in the playoffs. If you look at 2010 in the West Final, the Rough Riders went in there and won. You look 2013, the Riders won 35-13 in the West Final. Calgary can be had at McMahon Stadium in a West Final. They fall in love with themselves a bit. So I'm not sure that finishing second is necessarily a disaster for the Rough Riders. They still get their home playoff game, and then they still get to go to Calgary, and where they've proven they can already proven they can be competitive now. And all the pressure's on Calgary at that point, and I know this isn't the Calgary team that it's had before either. It's a very vulnerable Calgary Stampeders football team.
What a group of receivers too, though. That's a great receiver. They don't have a running back. I can barely name who their running back is week to week, and I like their defense, but they do have good receivers. And Bo Levi can throw that little intermediate pass and let them get yards after they catch it. Riders seem to have issues with.
Well, they can't figure him out. Chris Jones had him figured out.
Yeah.
Chris Jones created all sorts of discomfort for Bo Levi Mitchell, and not necessarily with coverage, a lot of times with pressure. They just kept him off balance. And the Rough Riders this year have not been able to keep either Nick Arbuckle or Bo Levi Mitchell off balance. If you look at it in the 2 games that the Rough Riders have played Calgary, I think Calgary's thrown a total of 9 incompletions over those 2 games.
No, it's crazy.
Riders have thrown more incompletions at each game than Calgary has thrown against the Rough Riders all season. And when they've tried blitzing, especially the last game against Calgary, they tried blitzing and Bo Levi Mitchell ate it up, and they pulled back on the pressure pretty quickly. And when they hung back, Bo Levi Mitchell just looked around and picked them apart. So if you're the Rough Riders, what do you do? Yeah. You're facing Bo Levi Mitchell, and he's going to get you either way. Would you rather get hit by a truck or a bus when he gets hot?
Yeah. I'm just looking at the email here. The Calgary Stampeders signed Dexter McCorrell to the practice roster. And remember, he was pretty good with the Eskimos. I think he was a rookie a year in 14, All-Star 15, 16 before he headed off down to the States. And he was in a show about the Arena League that he was free on one of these programs I watched. So, with Corey Greenwood out, do they really have a middle? I'm assuming he played middle linebacker. Do they really have an outstanding middle linebacker? So that must mean Corey. So, they're building themselves up for the playoff run. Dexter McCorrell can surely help them, I think.
The Riders they need to stay healthy or reasonably healthy until that point.
Isn't that
because they're so deep?
Knock wood and all those good things. They have been reasonably healthy. If you think about it, the way the season started with Dan Clark, could have been gone for the whole season based on that accident in early May, and he's back healthy. Brendan Labatt comes back and is playing at the same level he was last year before this hip stuff. Zach Evans, I don't know if he had his best game. He's got to get a little. He's had some rustiness, and they've lost. I don't know how long they're going to lose Micah. Maybe he'll be back.
No, Philip Blake was out for a significant duration, and you can tell that he gives them an element when they ran the ball, and Philip Blake is on that offensive line. One of William Powell's first rushes in that game, Philip Blake took the unfortunate person who was in his path and pretty much pushed him out of the TV screen and perhaps somewhere to Vancouver Island. So that's a real nastiness added to the offensive line with Philip Blake.
And I'll be honest with people, he's the least nasty guy you're ever going to talk to. He's very soft-spoken, very kind, very funny. And I'm thinking, man, you sure different when you get on the field. It's kind of like Thaddeus Coleman. Thaddeus Coleman's another nice guy, but on the field he turns into this animal that just, they want to beat up people and be nasty and that kind of stuff. And that's what you want along the offensive line. Interesting that Dakota Shepley, who is going to be you and I vote for the
I get a vote this year?
No, you don't. It's a long story.
I got a vote yesterday. Why don't I get a vote this year?
Long story we need to discuss.
I need a vote. I voted
yesterday. We don't have enough.
Huh?
There's only 5 people that get votes for the FRC awards.
Well, I want one. I've never had one.
I get one. Okay, well, we'll discuss it.
We're going to argue.
We'll discuss it offline here when I can explain to you a whole lot of stuff that's going on with that. But where were we? We were talking about.
We're talking about votes.
Votes. But Dakota Shepley is going to be the hands-on winner for Rookie of the Year, I think, and
on the team.
Yeah, I don't know who's going to happen outside of that, but maybe do you want to just run down the awards?
Sure. Cody Fajardo, most outstanding player.
Oh, you think so?
Charleston Hughes. 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was a really good debate to be had. Mm-hmm. Charleston Hughes or Cody Fajardo. Yeah. And Shaq Evans was almost on the periphery of that conversation too. Shaq Evans has had a couple of blah games in a row. Charleston Hughes has gone 3 games without a sack, and Cody Fajardo keeps being Cody Fajardo.
Cody Fajardo's
the debate now is Cody Fajardo the most outstanding player in the West Division.
I think he is. I think you can't give it to Mike Riley because he's on a non-playoff team.
Brian Burnham is the best candidate in BC. And on a better team.
On a better team, it's hands down.
Although in 75, Willie Burden was named the most outstanding player in the league, and he played for a Calgary team that was awful, but he also rushed for 1,800 yards.
How far is Burnham going to be at now? Is he about 16?
He's about 13, 14.
Yeah, so
Brian Burnham's been tremendous.
And that non-catch might have been the greatest non-catch, but you could see his toes were on the line in that one they challenged and stuff. But
Ray Algard made a one-handed catch in the mid-90s that didn't count. It was a touchdown that was called back. I think it was in Ottawa, and it was like that. He just kind of speared the ball one-handed.
Well, Duron Carter made a pretty nice one-handed catch.
But that one counted.
That one counted, yes. Very true. Where were we? So we had Cody
Fajardo in the West. Andrew, what's going to drive that discussion ultimately is what is the decision made in Winnipeg?
Winnipeg can either decide it all for us, or the voters are all going to have to decide what we're going to decide, and it's going to become I hate to say it, a moral and ethical. What we decide, can a guy who got caught cheating be the best player in the league? And I waffle back and forth, and I can honestly say I don't think he can. I think it'd be a public relations nightmare for the CFL if Andrew Harris gets through and becomes, because all we're writing about then will be and talking about his PEDs and how can this happen under league.
But it's not the vot's job to look out for the public interest, relations interests of the Canadian Football League.
So whose job is it then? Who decides this? So that's the part I wrestle with. So the CFL has no rules for this, and they're standing back and letting the Football Reporters of Canada decide what's going to happen. Do I agree with that? I think it's kind of BS a little bit. I think the CFL, it's their rules.
Well, they've done all they can do as far as issuing discipline to Andrew Harris. They suspended him for 2 games. Yeah. That's the extent to which the CFL should be involved. If they start dictating to the voters who should and shouldn't be voting or voted upon or voted for, then I think the FRC's got larger issues because you've got Big Brother trying to decree.
But that's when you open another can of worms on this can of worms and on this can of worms. What do we do? What does the FRC do? And as I said, the ball's in Winnipeg's court. Ball's on Winnipeg's side of the field. If he gets out of Winnipeg.
And Willie Jefferson is a decent candidate. He's cooled off a little bit lately,
They all kind of cool off a little bit.
But Andrew Harris, if you look at the raw numbers there and the kind of season he has had.
And I thought he kind of cooled off after they came back, but no, he hasn't. He had the 146 yard. He had 200 yards in one combined yards in one game. Winnipeg is kind of cool.
What's changed is they've stopped winning or virtually stopped winning.
They stopped doing
but that's going to be interesting. If Andrew Harris's name is up there, then there's a real debate there. But sometimes if you have to ask the question, you know the answer. If you're thinking about it, is this the right thing to do? I think the mere introduction of the question sometimes allows you to get to the answer. Yep. So if you've got Andrew Harris and you're thinking, and you've got Cody Fajardo who's had this kind of year, and even if you talk about Brian Burnham, Reggie Beggleton in Calgary is having I finally figured out the difference between Beggleton and Brescison. It took me a while. Yeah, I know.
But they look alike too. They're same body types.
But that's the thing. If you've got the absolute spotless Cody Fajardo, and then you've got the candidacy of Andrew Harris when you take that suspension into consideration, that's a really interesting, and there could be 3 stages to that debate. The first one's in Winnipeg, where they decide if he's the candidate coming out. I don't see how they can't put his name forward for most outstanding Canadian.
Yep.
And so that's going to be a debate regardless, but most outstanding player. If he doesn't come out of Winnipeg as that,
I don't even know who Winnipeg has a Canadian. I don't know. That's follow that.
Well, Adam Wolotarski would be a decent choice.
Yeah, but he's no Andrew Harris. You move on from there. So the rookie for the Riders, I'm thinking, is Dakota. I think we started with Dakota.
Dakota Shepley.
Lineman, some words will come up, some discussion about Thaddeus Coleman. I think it's Dan Clark.
I think it's Dan Clark.
Just everything he's done and overcome and just played every game. And I think he's better. and I think he's a better center this year than he has been ever before, and he may be even at an all-star caliber. Because there's got to be some reason why the quarterback's doing so well. And then Canadian, we said Cameron Judge. I don't think that's it.
There's really no contest on that one.
And special teams is going to probably be the biggest wrinkle because I know John Ryan's averaging and doing all these kind of things.
50.1 yards a punt. But he's shattering a Rider record that has stood since 1983.
Okay,
this is easy.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm looking at his net punt yards. The fact he's got 12 or 13
Is it
singles.
his fault that people can't cover kicks?
I think
there was one punt they had returned for a touchdown where the Riders were called for no yards and they still couldn't stop the returner. So how does John Ryan be penalized?
Well, the problem is
there's
nobody.
Coverage units aren't really
in
that great.
John's defense, there's nobody on special teams. Brett Lowther hasn't had that type of season. No. One of the young guys, special teams players, Gagne or Chevy, I always get them mixed up, is leading the team in special teams tackles. Might be Gagne.
John Ryan's averaging 50.1 yards a punt.
It's really no vote in your mind.
He's done that. Louis Pasaglia has done that, and he's about to do it again. That's league history as far as 50 yards a punt.
So we got MOP, defensive, Canadian, lineman.
Defensive is Charleston Hughes.
Charleston Hughes, Ryan, and...
he's got to pick it up, though.
I know.
I mean, Charleston Hughes is hitting that same wall that he did last year, not for the same duration necessarily. But he's been stuck on 15 sacks for a few weeks now. Yeah. That hasn't prevented the Rough Riders from exerting pressure, and perhaps the fact that opponents have to pay attention to Charleston Hughes is liberating for other members of the defense. They got 6 sacks last week against BC. But Charleston Hughes has stopped sacking the quarterback, as he did this time of year last year. Cause for concern?
I still think I a little bit of concern, but I think Derek Moncrief has kind of cooled off a little bit too.
But it's Charleston Hughes.
Let's throw Mike Edom in the mix. Edom.
Is it Edom, isn't it?
Edom, yes. Let's throw Mike Edom in the mix. He had an amazing game against the Lions. He had those 2 forced fumbles. He covers everyone. People in the league talk about him. They talk about where he is on defense.
So is he the most outstanding Canadian then? Is it absolutely a lock for Cameron Judge? Because Mike Edom's become a really good safety.
He was a really good safety last year. That was a great signing, and he's a good guy. People in the locker room follow him, and they respect him. And I'm kind of.
And his segment on CKRM each week with Derek Taylor is hilarious.
Yeah, does he do one?
Yes, every Monday.
Oh, okay. I wonder why he was on every Monday. But he's very smart and he's very intelligent and he's a great safety and he moves up into the box to cover the run. He blitzes.
He's a leader.
He's a leader. That's what Cam Judge has done though. Has been steady over the whole season.
And Jason Shivers really uses him well. And when he has sacked the quarterback, there's been nobody between Cameron Judge and the quarterback. They just find ways to free him up schematically, and that's not generally good news for the limbs or the well-being of the quarterback.
So let's put all these guys together, and they're in Edmonton on Saturday night. What are you thinking?
Trevor Harris is back. That makes things interesting. But the Eskimos they could win by 50 or lose by 50. It doesn't really. It doesn't. They're weird. They're flaky, and who knows what you're going to get out of them, and who knows what they're playing for, because they know exactly where they're going to be the second Sunday of October
I wonder how
or November.
hard that is to you talk about the game in front of you and all that stuff, and you're watching. Who played on the weekend? Toronto and who Toronto play?
They played Ottawa, didn't they?
Yeah, maybe. No.
Hamilton? Toronto played.
I can't even. But
Ottawa played Hamilton.
And Toronto would have.
Who cares?
Whatever.
Toronto played Montreal, 27-24.
So neither team could do anything in the standings. Like the Argos are thinking about next year, and the Alouettes are thinking about the playoffs. So I wonder, they're professionals. You got to play the game, but how hard do you play the game? And I know I just answered my question. But
I think you play it hard, but do you play it with how much passion do you play it?
And how many guys, and how you're watching, go, I hope a guy doesn't get hurt, like tear up a knee or something like that. And they're watching you kind of cross your fingers, and that's the kind of stuff. But, and there's the CFL, that's what happened this year. Everything was kind of locked up earlier than traditionally, other than the playoff positioning that's going on right now. But the playoffs are done, and maybe next year it'll be better.
How do you know? I mean, the CFL did all they could. They dispensed with the interlocking games during the final month of the season, and they made everything divisional.
And they got into these Saturday triple headers.
And so you think, okay, this has – and during the summer, you're looking at Riders Edmonton for the final 2 weeks thinking that's going to be really good because Edmonton played reasonably well early in the season. Yeah. But after that, it's like there really hasn't been much reason to hype these games. And here's one for you. Who takes more undisciplined penalties over these next two games? That's two teams that have such a penchant for taking penalties that make people slap their foreheads. These are two teams that the Riders need to get that under control.
Yeah.
If there's one thing that the Riders haven't done well under Craig Dickinson, other than not beat Calgary, it's get these undisciplined penalties under control. Yeah. Can you flip that switch?
I don't know how you do that
suddenly.
So how many of them are aggressive plays, being too aggressive? Like, you don't want to take away aggressiveness. You want to take stupidity. But
Thaddeus Coleman gets a 15-yard unnecessary roughing penalty. What is that? Yeah. What are you doing? Yeah. But that's the Edmonton Eskimos.
That's what they do too.
That's their forte. They do that with far greater frequency. And that's been their tendency as long as Jason Moss has been there.
So who's a better coach in your mind, Dickinson or Jason Moss?
Oh, there's no contest. There's
something to be said.
Who's better looking, me or Tom Selleck, right?
Something to be said for that calm demeanor on what I really like, and this is another tangent I'm taking off, Craig Dickinson lets his guys do their jobs. He doesn't. You can hear. We get together, the coordinators and I, and we decide who's going to play. They do. I don't make that call. That's the coordinator's call. I don't make this call. And I like that. And Chris Jones was pretty good at doing that too, except on defense. But Craig Dickinson understands that these guys are paid to do their jobs, and let them do their jobs, and then we can see where we are at the end of the night. I really like that. I think that's what Craig Dickinson has done.
With Chris Jones, though, what effect did he have upon Stephen McAdoo? Because if you look at the Stephen McAdoo offense this year compared to last year, no Chris Jones. Has he given him better
a little bit better.
Does Stephen McAdoo have better personnel at his disposal, or does he have more autonomy, or both?
Oh no, Duron Carter kind of mixing things up for a little bit. That was halfway through the season they got rid of him, but I think that was a distraction, and I still think that what they pulled with Zach Collaros in the West semifinal last year, whether he was going to play or not, and not going to play, was a distraction for the team. I think, looking back in hindsight, I think that the team were uncomfortable with that, being forced to lie about whether Zach was going to play. I remember Labatt and Cam Marshall sitting at the front of the podium that day, not looking at us. I know it doesn't have any relation to stuff,
but they played that unnecessary game with a quarterbacking late in the year, and the fact that you can look at it now and say, okay, the last thing the Rough Riders have to be concerned with going into the playoffs is quarterbacking. Yeah. Even if Zach Collaros had played, this is the Zach Collaros with 9 touchdown passes, 13 interceptions, and just being as ordinary can be. Now you've got a quarterback who's an MOP.
Wow.
In the MOP conversation. So Stephen McAdoo, I think, has benefited from. Jeremy O'Day has certainly done Stephen McAdoo some favors when you look at the players he's given them. I think patience has paid off for the Rough Riders too, because Shaq Evans is a different player than he was last year. Kyran Moore is a better player than he was last year. So
JW
and Naaman Roosevelt staying healthy, which he had not done ever, right?
And Jordan Williams-Lambert hasn't quite been utilized yet.
I don't get this one at all.
I don't know.
Why isn't he playing inside?
He's got to be inside. The most effective a guy can be is, even if Arsenal was playing and JW's on the sideline, Arsenal can't be that effective outside like that. Corey Watson's quietly had a good year, but why can't Corey Watson play outside? Move JW
Jordan Williams-Lambert inside. He caught only 2 passes last week while playing a wide receiver most of the time. Yeah. The 2 passes he caught were while he was playing slot back.
So I don't
the rest of the time, it's just why pay Jordan Williams-Lambert the kind of money that they are paying him, and why re-sign him for that duration if you're not going to put him in an optimal position to succeed? Maybe
these next 2 games are going to blow him out. It's an interesting point. As I was going to mention this, that after the game in Vancouver, Mike Edam challenged me. He says, what did you think would happen when you saw Zach Collaros go down and Cody Fajardo came on the field? He says, you wrote us off. And I said, I didn't write you off. I was pretty doubtful that what was going to happen with this team. I didn't think things are going to... And he'd start yelling, hey, McCormick didn't think that Cody Fajardo could step up and play. And I'm going, I don't think I was alone.
No.
So I kind of...
Did the Rough Riders. Because going into the Ottawa game the following week, they were talking about a quarterback rotation.
Isaac Harker, yeah.
So if there was this unwavering belief in Cody Fajardo, why was there even the mere introduction of the possibility of a quarterback tandem?
And sometimes, as a reporter, after games, you try to avoid being confrontational with players because they're still pretty emotional, and you can get into some ugly situations. Not saying it can happen, but you don't. So
And it's not our job to believe in these guys.
No, it's
either.
not. It's not my job to do that. Absolutely.
I don't know why there would be that assumption that we're there to wave the pom-poms.
And they all think we're fans, and I'm not a fan. I must admit, I'm not a fan of I'm a reporter. Do I like is life better when they win? Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. The bottom line is, I know people, is you cheer for the story. That's what we all cheer for. We want a good story, a good game, and good games, and winning and playoff runs, and winning and losing streaks all produce good stories. So that's what we cheer
I had
for.
season tickets for 40 years. So draw your own conclusions from that. I've written 3.2 books about the Rough Riders, so draw your own conclusions from that as far as my interest in the Rough Riders. But we're not there to be cheerleaders for the team. Certainly not looking like this. So we call it as we see it. We're not there to have faith in these players. That's not our job. That's for the coaches. That's for management. That's for the board.
It's our job to doubt them.
It's our job. It's our
job when they do well to promote that too.
Exactly. But if there's skepticism, I mean, part of a columnist's job is to certainly be a skeptic, perhaps a cynic, perhaps a curmudgeon. But it's not our job to, we believe in you. Yeah. And I remember when Darian Durant got hurt in Winnipeg. Yeah. And I wrote them off immediately. I mean, this season's over. Play taps, RIP, it's done. And I got so many emails saying, oh, you don't believe in Tino Sinceri. No. Well, A, it's not my job to believe in Tino Sinceri, but B, they're done.
They're done.
They're finished. And my other suggestion was trade for Henry Burris, and that created a bit of a stir. Well, if they had been able to trade for Henry Burris, and Brendan Taman certainly tried to do so, they might have 5 Grey Cup championships instead of 4.
You don't think Kerry Joseph was the answer?
He was in 2007. So, yeah. I mean, it's not our job to okay, come on, boys, we can do it. That's 1940s, 1950s stuff. And it, despite my wardrobe, which is ancient, it's actually 2019. Anyway, do we have anything else to discuss? We didn't get any questions this week.
I had something very important to discuss.
We do have a new room.
Do you have a new book?
I have a new book.
What's it called?
100 Things Every Rough Rider Fan Should Know and Do Before They Die.
And how close are you to being that fan that dies?
Well, judging by my introduction when I barely warbled it out, very close.
So maybe you can tell me. Last week I asked you for some highlight. Give me a tidbit that someone's going to read about that and say, "Huh, I didn't know that."
Riders won the Grey Cup in 2013. That's the first chapter.
Okay, I like that start. I think that's picking up on a high.
Well, you know what? There's a really cool little story in there. And without giving away too much of the contents of the book, I didn't know this until I talked to Darian Durant about it. After the game, there was the prolonged celebration, as you would expect, and then Darian went home, got changed, and joined the mob on the Green Mile.
Yeah, that's
mob of people on the Green Mile. And very inconspicuously, he wasn't walking around going, hey, look at me, I'm Darian Durant, I just won a Grey Cup. He just wanted to experience it. He just wanted to immerse himself in it. And there were people who, some of whom through bleary eyes, looked at him and said, he goes, yeah, that's me. But he wasn't out and about trying to celebrate himself. He wanted to celebrate with the fans. And I'd never, until I talked to Darian, I didn't know that he'd actually gone and joined the massive people.
When I was reading that tidbit or that chapter, thinking, this is an intensely private guy. Like I remember once I saw him at a movie theater, and he kind of had his hoodie up. He was like trying to hide, and he looked at me, and I looked at him, and I could tell that he didn't want to be recognized. I said hi. That was our extent of. So that's pretty cool to see that he would do it, and it tells you how much that game he meant, how much the fans he meant to him. And I would bet, if they win a Grey Cup here or in that Grey Cup, Cody Fajardo would do the same thing.
Can you imagine Cody Fajardo if they win a Grey Cup? Can you imagine? I mean, what his presence in the community, but just the iconic status, the degree to which he's revered here already.
Yeah.
If he goes and wins, and this is after 15 starts, if he goes and wins a Grey Cup here right away, there might be a third statue outside Mosaic Stadium.
But I think we're jumping a little ahead of that one. I think we still have to see what he does. But I think he's an incredible. I was thinking that when I was watching his press conference and listening to everything and re-listening last night. I've never experienced a guy like this in my time in the CFL. Some receivers a little bit. J. Roy Simon and these guys are pretty good, but not like he's the same. They lose, he comes out, he's frustrated. Against the Lions, he was frustrated and he lets his feelings show. And I've never seen a quarterback handle himself like Cody. And I'm kind of looking forward to the next couple of years. I think it'll be a lot of fun getting to know this young man and his wife. And it sounds like he may want to live here. we'll see what happens there. That'll be a big change to have a
We'll
quarterback.
see what his first exposure to a Saskatchewan winter when the alternative is California.
Well, I don't know where he lives in the. We don't because she's enjoyed.
She's in Washington working on her master's.
Yeah, so she's
his wife Laura.
Yeah, and his dad's stuff. So anyway, I think we've covered just about every spot except.
Our new room, by the way, we have moved to a different part of the building. This is our first day in a different locale in 1964 Park Street. So as time goes by, we will have a much sharper background than we do right now. But this is our new podcast room, and we get a lot of questions about the old decor that looked like somebody's rumpus room from the 1950s or 60s.
I'm going to miss that rumpus room decor.
All that it was missing were cigarette holders and a hi-fi. So
that's right.
Send us off, Murr.
All right. If you enjoy the podcast, and why wouldn't you, please leave a review and a 5-star rating. It helps us grow the podcast. You can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to send us a question, you can email Rob at rvanstone@postmedia.com, and we'll read it on the show for sure. You can follow Rob at Twitter at Rob Vanstone, or me at Murray LP. And can I throw it in? Day 68 of Grey Cup Fit Up. That's 68 consecutive days of travel and workout.
I was at 6, and then it was election day yesterday, and I spent the whole day watching the election. So now today will be day 1.
That's all. Well, make it day
Fat Up.
I'm pretty proud of myself. I'm pretty proud of the community I've been part of, and it's been a lot of fun. And hopefully, all the way to the Grey Cup.
Well done. Like your steak. For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone, and thanks as well to producer Mark Melnichuk for listening to us for this long. We'll do this again next week with number 74.
Yeah.
Wow. Number 74. For Murray McCormick, I'm Rob Vanstone. Thanks again. Take care.